Hi, my name is Treasure, and today I'm going to be talking about the psychological aspects of performance injury, specifically for indoor boys volleyball. So my target population is high school boys volleyball, indoor volleyball, which is roughly between the ages of 14 and 18. And I chose to work with the outside hitter position specifically. I chose this sport because I also played volleyball and at this same level, so from 7th to 12th grade. My position was the libero, so I played back row. And in my time of playing, I didn't sustain any severe injuries, but I did witness a lot of front row players that did, which is why I chose to research a front row position. And I was also shadowing at an AT, athletic trainer at a high school where the boys were in season. So I was able to observe a few practices and games and work closely with their rehab and treatment. A common injury in this position is patellar tendinopathy or patellar tendonitis or jumper's knee. It's a chronic overuse injury affecting the anterior aspect of the knee. The main causes are high workload, vigorous weight-bearing activity, and repetitive jumping. It's described as like a dull ache with occasional sharp pains. The symptoms typically do not limit participation, but they do intensify after activity. A statistic is 45% of male players experience this injury, and male players experience symptoms more frequently than females. It's not a career-ending injury, but symptoms are persistent and aggravating, which is why I chose this injury in particular, because I thought it would be interesting to see how the athletes psychologically deal with it in terms of symptoms in rehab. So some psychological factors that affect sport injury rehab are social support environment, cognition, which is self-confidence, and emotional and behavioral variables. So the first one being social support and environment. This involves relationships with parents, coaches, teammates, and peers, even outside of sport. Factors like overly involved parents or coaches who constantly issue negative reinforcements, or even when they fail to create individual relationships with their athletes, or just poor non-existent relationships between teammates, creates a negative and discouraging environment where the athlete does not feel supported or does not see the benefit in sport injury rehab because they feel like nobody is supporting them. The second one is cognition, and specifically I want to talk about self-confidence. I feel like it's very important to the rehab process because if the athlete does not believe in themselves, which is really common after an injury, they experience lack of motivation, non-acceptance of the outcomes that come with their actions, and a loss of social identity. And then the last one is emotional and behavioral variables. This mainly relates to mood disturbances and reactions to an injury, like the way they interpret or appraise an injury. When an athlete has an overbearing mood disturbance, when they typically receive it as a stressful or as a loss, they are defeated before the rehab program even begins. So the main goal of a sport injury rehab is adherence and effective communication from the sport healthcare professional to the athlete. So with the psychological intervention I potentially plan to provide to this population, either through prevention or rehab, the main goal is adherence and communication. So I'm going to talk about how we can turn these things around to a more positive light. So for social support and environment, what we really want to see is positive support from parents, teammates, coaches, and peers. Also where the athlete feels like they have an active role in their decision making. This just facilitates a positive, motivational environment that allows for growth and where an athlete can adhere to a rehab or prevention program, and it also increases engagement and performance. You'll see a lot of education on this screen, and I feel like education is key when it comes to communicating with the athlete, because when they know why they are doing something, they are more likely to do it. So for this one, education, I will work on educating the athlete on ways to build or place themselves in a positive environment, and this can be like working on talking with them about how to work on themselves, like being the change they want to see. So being more positive or open to interpersonal relationships, or just communicating with other people in their social circle and letting them know what helps and what doesn't, and what they want them to do more of or less of so they can thrive or succeed in their environment. For our self-confidence, we have all these personal incentives, and I feel like self-confidence is crucial when it comes to the completion of a rehab program and taking part of preventative behaviors. So things like self-efficacy, sense of self, valued outcomes and beliefs, it all results in confidence in their abilities to execute the necessary behaviors that they need. And so they really take control of their own motivation. For improvement in this category, I would work on setting specific, measurable, and difficult yet realistic goals to achieve throughout the rehab program, as I feel it will result in more success in recovery and return to sport. And I will work on changing negative self-talk to positive self-talk to increase their sense of self and self-confidence. For our emotional and behavioral variables, what we want to see is full engagement in coping and rehab, being an active role in the process, and interpreting the situation as an opportunity for growth. This is really the definition of adherence. So this would be the key. This is the goal. Education in this category looks like telling them ways to stabilize their mood. So it can be anything from an adequate amount of sleep to eating an appropriate diet. We'll manage expectations by working on the athlete's psychological adjustment. So this means addressing their concern of recovery and return and managing their expectation about that. And then hopefully we could take away some of the heightened, stressful, and threatened feelings that come with the coping process when we navigate through emotions. So 3 theories I found important to my population and the cognitive and psychological intervention I potentially plan to provide through rehab. The first one being the theory of planned behavior. And also I'm taking like the psychological factors and applying theories to those psychological factors, because I feel like it would be beneficial for the athlete to overcome and explain their behavior during rehab. If that makes sense. So the first one is the theory of planned behavior, and it really is a combination of their attitude towards the program, subjective norms, which is the belief of whether the people of importance approve of the behavior, and then perceived behavioral control, whether they feel like they have control in the decision-making process. That all leads to intention to the behavior, which is adhering to the program. The second one is personal investment theory. And all of these factors like information, teaching, personal experiences, they all affect personal incentives. Again, that self-confidence, self-efficacy, sense of self, and which play a positive role on engagement if they do have all these factors. And then the third one is the stress and coping theory. And basically the stress or the stimuli will be the injury. The perception is how they perceive it. So it could be either a primary appraisal, which is the first interpretation of the stressor. So it could be either positive, dangerous, or irrelevant. And then secondary appraisal is whether they have insufficient resources or sufficient resources to deal with it. If they have insufficient resources, that results in the stress. And then the coping is overcoming of the stress. So with the theory of planned behavior, I really wanted to focus on how the social environment promotes adherence. And at the high school I was observing, one of the injured athletes with patellar tendinitis had both positive and social support. So the athletic trainer was the one who was emphasizing the importance of health and treatment and provided preventative behaviors like knee strengthening exercises or proper technique. And on the other hand, when he came into the training room, he spoke about how the coach didn't really consider it as a real injury and brushed off his feelings and made him feel compelled to play while injured. So he really didn't see why he should keep coming to get treatment if he was just going to have to play injured anyways. And so that's really a prime example of positive versus negative social support. Also, a study revealed that male athletes are more likely to feel pressured to play by coaches, fans, and teammates while injured, which makes them feel guilty and less respected if they do not play while hurt. So I really want to get rid of that narrative that you have to play while injured. Like the athlete needs to know that there is life outside of sport, and that sport doesn't have to be their identity. For the personal investment theory, basically I want to focus on how personal incentives influence participation. And that's, again, that self-confidence and self-perception. So I feel like at this level, at this age group, this is an area that they can be improved upon because they're at an age where they're trying to find themselves. So much of their identity revolves around sports. And I feel like a positive self-perception makes the athlete feel like they can proceed and succeed on their own by controlling their own situation. And it's basically showing how they are motivated intrinsically, which is very key in a rehab program. And then the last one is the stress and coping theory. It's emotional and behavioral reaction to injury. They are based off the interpretation or appraisal that we talked about. And athletes dealing with patellar tendinitis tend to perceive this injury as irrelevant or unimportant, as there's not really a treatment that can provide an instant cure. So they exhibit a primary cognitive appraisal. The characteristics of this injury, like the location and symptoms, are also factors that influence this way of thinking as well. They're considering that this pain is not overbearing to the point where they can't participate in the activity, and they are likely aware that this chronic injury is most common, so they feel like it was bound to happen. So the verse I chose that motivates me in my mission statement is, I will bless the Lord who guides me. Even at night, my heart instructs me. I know the Lord is always with me. I will not be shaken, for he is right beside me. Psalm 16:7-8. And I chose this verse because it really just provides me comfort. Much of the time I experience stress and fear as I walk into the unknown and deeper into the calling that the Lord has for me. It just helps me remember that God is standing over me, covering my hands with his powerful, protecting, comforting, and healing hands. Like you see in this picture, I really want to be an athletic trainer. So that's kind of like what I model after. So as a healthcare professional, I just want to be the best that I can be and really benefit anyone's lives that I come across. I recognize that I'm doing the Lord's work, and I can trust that God will be by my side with every patient I encounter or lay my hands on. I'm going to go back a little bit. So in conclusion, my general recommendations to overcoming obstacles would be figuring out your limitations and facing them head on, working hard at being optimistic, and not being afraid to seek help when needed, rather that be professionally or with someone you trust, and to maintain active goals and accomplish them. One of the major items I learned from this course and will apply to my career is the biopsychosocial approach. And this basically, to me, is treating the athlete in a holistic manner, which I'm not just treating the injury, but I'm treating the athlete as a whole. And this course really drove in the idea that the mind greatly influences health as well. All three of these factors are important as they are all intertwined. For example, the occurrence of a sport injury is influenced by all three of these factors, and all three of these factors. Oh, I'm sorry. Wait. Yeah, and then events can lead to, all three of these factors influence the occurrence of a sport injury. So stressful life events can cause an athlete to be distracted on the court, which can lead to an injury. So they're really important, and I will continue to use them in my career. Some references. Thank you for listening.